Hey, Nancy. Oh,
I see August. I see Denise. I see. Do we have a quorum? I see the councilman. I think we have a quorum to the director. I think we're all here.
Looking to you, Giancarlo and Don, to see where we are in standing with landmarks.
Right now, I'm counting 4, and I think we need at least one more. But it is a quorum of the entire joint commission, so.
In fact, I think I see more than 4.
Who was present from landmarks?
Maybe they could all raise their hands.
Don, I count 5.
Thank you, Bob.
Well,
Yeah, I'm here.
So I think between the two of us, we have a total quorum.
Okay. Well, thank you. So welcome to the public, to everyone on this call for the special joint commission meeting. I'm going to turn it over to staff first to call the roll. And then well, first we'll call the roll, then I'm going to turn it over to staff to give the preamble and the presentation in advance of the applicant, Sherwin Williams, presenting. So let's first call the roll of both commissions, and then I'll turn it over to Joyce.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Anderson.
Here.
Bonezzi. Kalikia.
Here.
Downing.
Here.
Dreyer.
here.
Edmund.
Here.
Fluker.
Present.
Wong.
here.
Curry.
Present.
McCray Scott.
Present.
Hall. Slife.
Present.
Strickland.
Here.
Tarasic.
Here.
Trot. And for the record, Ms. Trot is recusing herself from the meeting today. Madam Chair, we have a quorum.
Okay, thank you, Don. So meeting's called to order. So to the director, I think we're going to first read the preamble and rules for the meeting. Director Wong.
Thank you, Chair Curry. In compliance with notification requirements of Ohio's open meeting law and section 101.021 of the Codified Ordinances of Cleveland, Ohio, 1976, notice of this meeting has been publicly posted. All boards and commissions under the purview of the City Planning Department conducts its meetings according to Robert's Rules of Order. Actions during the meeting will be taken by voice vote. Abstentions from any vote due to a conflict of interest should be stated for the record prior to the taking of any vote. All meeting activity is being recorded. These proceedings are also being live streamed via YouTube. All public comments have been received via the City of Cleveland Planning Commission website and the email address, cityplanning@clevelandohio.gov. Copies of all comments have been distributed to all members of the committees and commission prior to the meeting, and they've also been posted publicly. Thank you, Joe. If you could go to the next slides. Don, would you like to walk through this slide?
Sure, Director. Yes, there has been a change in the agenda today. Yesterday, the Downtown Flats and Warehouse District Combined Committee made their recommendations. They approved 2 elements of the project. including the signage and the lighting plan. But they tabled the landscape, hardscape elements and the site amenities. So we will see the entire presentation today, at least for the commission's feedback and direction, but we won't be taking action on those two items today. They will have to return to the joint committee.
And Don, this was an update as of yesterday. The Sherwin-Williams team will only be presenting the signage and branding and lighting today. So they have removed the landscape and site amenities from the presentation for further study. And we can walk through those details in the next few slides. Drew, if you could just walk through the recommendations. As Don has mentioned, the committee approved as presented unanimously the lighting elements and approved with conditions the signage. So we'll be viewing those today. The signage has been approved with the following conditions: that both sign packages okay with a short base added underneath to keep off the ground and snow, and then to consider options for RGB illumination of the paint chips instead of static paint. This is returning to committee after follow-up and consideration. The main points that were raised during the design review were that there would be additional study about adding seating and standing area accommodations throughout the large site for public and employees who are stepping outside of the building, for the public and employees who are stepping out of the building. The front garden area should also have consideration for seating elements for people to rest as they enjoy the garden. Coordination with RTA and city on transit waiting environment, seating and site amenities. I believe there should be a next slide. There are also considerations for bike and pedestrian accommodations on Frankfurt, which include extending the tabletop on West 3rd and other particular options regarding fencing and the addressing of West 6th. And that will be seen again. It'll come back before the commissions. But just wanted to raise that those were the elements that were raised yesterday and were tabled for further study. I did want to share that, Sherwin-Williams, the team has been very hard at work. I think you'll see today in the presentation of the lighting and the branding that, there's been a lot of thought prepared and there's been a lot of effort put into it. I just want to thank them for their efforts, for doing the preparation, for working through the comments from yesterday and doing the extra study. And then also just want to thank the Joint Commissioners for your time and your intentionality as you review what's really a really important critical project for our downtown area. We are, on behalf of the administration, really excited to see Sherwin-Williams be retained in our city core, right in the middle. And we just feel that this is an opportunity for civic vision and civic engagement for both Sherwin and the city and the public. And so these elements, are critical and require your thoughtfulness and your deliberation. So I'm looking forward to the discussion today. Back to you, Chair Curry. I believe you're muted.
I am muted. I was saying that we'll take two separate actions, I think, on the lighting and the signage when we get to the end of the presentation. But before the commission, actually, the Joint Commission deliberates or asks questions, we are going to open it up for a few public comments. And I will state sort of the process at the after Sherwin-Williams presents and the applicant. I will give a few rules for the public comment portion. Then we'll open it up to the commission members for questions and comments, and then we will deliberate. So to the applicants, to Sherwin-Williams team, welcome and take it away.
Great, thank you. Good morning. My name is Tim Muckley. I'm the Director of Corporate Real Estate for the Sherwin-Williams Company. We're here today to present our final plans for signage and branding and site and tower lighting. Our plans for landscape and site amenities were tabled yesterday by the Joint Design Review Committee. So we thought it would be best to work through their comments before presenting to this Joint Planning Commission. Presenting with me today is Julie Young, our Vice President of Communications, Bill Chilton and Nancy Clayton from Picard Chilton, Design Architects, Matt Heisey from Vocon, Sheila Piccioni from Vocon, and Samantha Bloom from Alvine Engineering. And with that, I'll turn over the presentation to our design team. I will say I'm having trouble. I'm not seeing any of the shared content. I'm going to probably try to log on and log off and log back on to make sure I can get that. So I'll be gone for a little bit.
Excellent. All right, next slide, please. And Nancy. Actually, I can take this real quick. As Tim just mentioned, these are the things we're going to be reviewing this morning. We're going to start by going through a recap of our November 30th final approval for all of our vertical construction. We'll touch quickly on the conditions that came out of that approval, quick update of where we are on addressing those conditions, and then we'll get into our site signage branding and then tower lighting and site lighting. Nancy. Nancy, you're on mute if you're speaking. All right, go ahead.
So this is Bill Chilton, and when we met in November, what we did is we reviewed the overall site layout and master planning, which approval was granted, and the final building massing for all three sites, and the building materiality and detailing of the pavilion, the tower, and the garage, and then all building enclosures were approved at that time. So with that, the design has progressed, and I think sort of sets the stage for the discussion today with regard to lighting and branding. Just another update, construction is well underway. We are finishing our caisson package as of next week, and we'll start to see this building going vertical within the next 2 months, which is great. Next slide, please. At the November 30th meeting, our final design approval did come with some conditions that we were to be working through with staff, which we have been and we will continue to do. A traffic report has been submitted, it's been reviewed, and it has been approved by the Division of Traffic Engineering. There was a condition to study the north facade of the tower and the street level. We are pulling that from today's presentation, but we will continue to work through the details of that. Coordination of public transit, landscape plans, again, we'll come back on that. We're working right now through the city with our avian consultant on addressing some of our bird safety issues, and that plan is being worked through both with our consultant and with planning staff. We will now come back again for the street and amenity plan. Coordination with the city arborist, all those things have occurred, and you'll see those hopefully in a few weeks. The last comment that is, I think, germane to today's conversation that came out of the Joint Commission was to design the pavilion in a way that future retail or future doors from Superior into the pavilion could be accommodated. And we have done that. That has been coordinated. The grading has been worked out. So as in the future, if a door was to be desired to be added to the Superior Avenue frontage of the pavilion, we know how to do that. Interior grade and exterior grade works out. We simply can add some sidewalk and add doors into the storefront system. So that has been taken care of. Next slide, please. We're going to jump right into site signage and branding, and I'm going to turn it over to Sheila Piccioni from Vocon.
Okay, so taking a look at the site plan, what we wanted to start with was really showing just how much you'll have on the site between the signage, the branding, but also what you'll be able to see within the interior. We really wanted to remain cognizant of the branding displays that you'll be able to see on the interior spaces of the pavilion, the podium, and even into the garage. So what you're looking at on the small orange dots is the signage, the V's and the P's, which we'll talk about a little bit later in the presentation. The blue B's that you see on the buildings, those are the spaces that you will be able to see into the interior and get another glimpse of Sherwin branding. Right now, we're going to be talking about location F, which is that pink location top of the page. So if you want to go to the next slide. So from a brand perspective and a brand story, the headquarters facility, the pavilion, podium, tower, and of course garage are really about how Sherwin comes together to create and inspire. So specific to the site and developing the brand communication for the site, we're really talking about the story focusing on the relationship between Sherwin-Williams and Cleveland and how each have impacted each other. So in developing the storytelling along Frankfurt, we really wanted to ensure we were creating a playful and bold sense of color that was inspired by Cleveland and really creating a point of pride for the community, but also creating that connective experience along Frankfurt from Public Square to the Warehouse District. So next slide. So within the concept, you'll start to see a series of panels that highlight various Cleveland neighborhoods and key destinations that Sherwin has had a connection to. So in this case, you're seeing the snapshot of the inspiration for the downtown panel that you'll be seeing in a minute. So you're seeing several destinations that Sherwin-Williams has either coded, colored, or developed innovative solutions for. In this case, you're seeing Rocket Mortgage, the USS Cod, the GE Chandelier, and the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. So then the next slide. So the goal of the design, seeing it actually implemented, is really to capture the colors and personality of each neighborhood by illustrating key points where Sherwin and Cleveland intersect, whether it's a destination that Sherwin has coded or colored, their first store, the site of their first store, or a nod to Sherwin-Williams history, such as Edward Williams' alma mater, which is Case Western. So seeing the composition as a whole, if you want to go to the next slide, you begin to see the opportunity to create distinct color palettes really representing each neighborhood, whether it be Ohio City, University Circle, I believe we have Little Italy in here, Tremont, Slavic Village, downtown, etc. You're really creating that continued path illustrating the colors of Cleveland. So going on to the next slide, going into the signage, the building ID tower, this was something that we had reviewed late November, had been approved at that time. We do not have additional intent beyond this. It has not changed, but the intent of the building identification, remains white during the day. And if you go to the next page, remains lit during the evening. So it's white both day and night. And then if you go on to the next page, just to get a capture of the dimensions for that particular sign, the S and the W are roughly 9 feet tall. The shorter letter forms within Sherwin-Williams are roughly 7 feet, and the entire composition is roughly 95 feet in width. And that does appear on both sides of the building. Okay, so we go to the next page. So then going back to the location plans, before we dive into these and before we dive into the design options, for the site identification and directional signage, we are showing 2 options as we continue to work with Sherwin to determine what their preferred option would be. But we do want to present both options for your review and approval today. So that said, those options shown have been vetted and developed with Sherwin staff. So again, looking at the location plan, we're illustrating the vehicular and pedestrian directionals. Of course, we have more of the vehicular pedestrians around 6th Street and Frankfurt, a couple on 3rd. The majority of the pedestrian directionals are really around the pavilion and public space. So if we want to go to the next slide. So taking a look at where the site identification will be going, the site ID sign has been placed within that front pavilion garden so that we can really utilize the building and the landscape as a backdrop, as well as aligning that sign with the building identification sign on the tower. So that's why you see it's kind of tucked back in the gardens in the plan view, pretty close to the building, but also on the left side of the site if you're looking directly at the pavilion and tower. So going on to the next page. So the site identifications and directionals, both vehicular and pedestrian, were developed to create a system that could be both flexible but also balance traditional signage with a hint of distinct Sherwin-Williams branding. So as we go through, you'll see signs pull inspiration from Sherwin's well-known color fan decks. So that's where you're hearing the reference to fan decks and paint chips. But this was also utilized to develop the proportions of the sign as well as incorporate color and bring a little additional storytelling to the site. So what you're seeing here is the first option for the site identification. You have a standard base. You have the Sherwin-Williams in the blue, the traditional brand color. And then in the evening, if you go to the next slide, you have that lit in the evening that changes to white. So moving on to the next with the site directionals. You see a more traditional use of the fan deck in the site directionals as soon as that slide comes up. Oh, sorry, we do have a rendering just showing that site identification in front of the pavilion. You can see that placement back within the gardens. You do have that opportunity to be able to walk behind and experience that sign as well. So if you want to go to the next slide. And then just from a standpoint of design intent, we are working with our vendors at the moment to make sure that we are minimizing the footprint of the sign identification. Right now, we're sitting at about 56 inches tall, but then we also have a roughly 32 foot width. But again, we are working with our vendors to minimize that footprint. So based on fabrication needs, how we incorporate lighting, things like that, we'll make sure to reduce that a little bit further. So then the next slide. So now going into the site directionals. So what you're seeing here on the far left is your primary vehicular directional. What you are seeing in the middle is your secondary vehicular directional, and what you are seeing on the far right is your pedestrian directional. So in both of the options for your site directionals, the gray panels are the same. Those are the similar sizes. So you have roughly a 4 foot, 6 foot, and 9 foot gray sign panel. What changes between the two options is the use of the paint chip. So what you're seeing here is the more traditional use of the paint chips. Is a little bit more formal with that rectilinear composition, splicing the signs. And then if you go to the next page, showing what it could be on the back of the directional signs. So in this particular case, not all locations need directional messaging on both front and back. So what we're taking a look at is any locations where we don't need directional messaging on the back, and that becomes a brand storytelling moment where we're able to incorporate, say, the specifications of the color or the coating or an additional story about Sherwin. So being able to mix that brand story and the directional signage together. The other thing of note is that the colors can change. Right now, you're seeing a color-coded system where the larger signs are blue. The secondary directional signs are in the red, and then you have your pedestrian signs in green. These could absolutely change. They could be multicolor to represent the Sherwin-Williams fan deck in a more literal sense, and each location can have its own palette if need be. So if we go to the next slide. So taking a look again just at the dimensions, which we've talked about a little bit. In this particular case, that gray portion, you do have a 3 by 9 on your primary sign. What's making this one a little bit taller, of course, is that use of the paint chips behind the sign, which is bringing it up to 10.6. So if you want to go to the next page, you just see how the proportions continue to work. So we're quite literally taking a chip off to make those shorter. So we have that, again, that standard height of the gray panels with the 3'6" and the 3'4". And then again, that height coming up a little bit more with that color detail. So that's where the signs become a little bit taller at 7'6" and 6 foot. So going on to just taking a look at the sign family as a whole. So being able to take a look at all of those in scale with each other within the environment, just so that you have a sense of size within the site. Okay, if you want to go to the next one. So option 2 takes the fan deck a little bit more literally. So this would be the site identification. You have that fan deck that's actually splayed out in a way that many designers utilize the fan deck. So having that a little bit more of a whimsy to the sign. In this case, in the evening, not only is the Sherwin-Williams illuminated, if you want to go to the next slide, but the blue portion is illuminated as well. This is where we started talking about potentially having RGB illumination incorporated. And then if you want to go to the rendering on the next page, just seeing how that feels against the building again, and of course incorporating that into the landscaping and having that tucked back so people can experience it front and back. So then going into the detail pages for this particular sign, Again, this one is a little bit taller just from a standpoint of you do have that fan deck raising up a little bit higher. So that's where it does reach about 6'6" with that fan deck behind it. But again, you have a similar width with that 31 to 32 feet. And again, we're working with our vendors to make sure we minimize that footprint. Okay. So then going into the directionals, you can see, again, you have those standard gray signage panels across all of the directional signage. In this particular case, we've taken that rectilinear chip form and we've now put it into that angular fan deck composition. So in this particular case, again, you're looking at different colors for all of the different locations, and we can, of course, change the colors per location so that you have multicolors per sign if we would like to go that direction. And in this particular case, this is where we also talked about, instead of having those as painted fins, being able to incorporate RGB illumination into those so that we could potentially incorporate color changing aspects, but also has that brand storytelling opportunity on the back of these signs as well. So if you want to go to the next one. So this just shows the dimensions. So again, we have our standard sizes that we talked about in this particular case. Because that paint chip or the fan deck portion does not go above the sign, you are stopping before you hit the top of the gray portion. So we're standing at that standard 9 foot, 6 foot, and I believe 4'6" for the smallest one if you want to go to the next page. And then the final page just takes a look again at the scale of all the signs together on the site. Oh, and those are our two options for the exterior signage. And then that concludes the signage.
So rolling to tower and site lighting, we'll pass over to Samantha Bloom from Outline Engineering.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Since we originally submitted this design in November, the design team has further developed the tower exterior lighting. Next slide, please. We've designed a prominent crowd lighting feature that will both enhance the greater Cleveland skyline and serve as a canvas to share the Sherwin-Williams color story. The lighting will have color changing capabilities so that it can be static and timeless, as seen in the white in the middle, or dynamic and colorful, as seen on the far right here. The colored lighting is fully customized, so it can be programmed to speak to the owner's brand, celebrate local events and causes, or promote awareness for charities, as just a few examples. Next slide. All right, here we can see how this feature wraps the tower crown, making it a dynamic feature visible from all angles. During the day, the lighting will be off and have a minimal impact on the building's look, while at night it will be on and take precedence as a building feature. Today, we are also sharing our concept of the building's site lighting. We're starting here with an overall plan of the existing site conditions, including all traffic lighting, pedestrian lighting, poles, overhead lines, and signage on the site. And on the following slides, we'll zoom into each of the 3 individual sites. Next slide. On the pavilion site, there is not a lot of existing infrastructure outside of the street and traffic lighting. So we plan to uphold the existing locations of the street and traffic lighting so as not to disrupt the traffic flow and current illumination levels as designed by Cleveland Power. We are coordinating with CPP to make sure that we have a consistent street light heads for the lights immediately adjacent to the building on West 3rd Street and Superior Avenue, shown here in blue. Next slide. At the tower site, again, we plan to uphold the existing locations of street and traffic lighting, which are shown in red and maroon on this plan. The only exception would be on West 3rd Street, where we anticipate relocating a street light so that it is not immediately adjacent to the sky bridge connecting the tower and pavilion buildings. We are coordinating that with CPP to see how the street light in 3rd can be designed so that it remains properly lit for vehicular traffic. We are treating the back one. Thank you. We're treating the pedestrian light poles, the orange dots shown here on plan, 1 of 2 ways on the tower site. CPP's poles immediately adjacent to the tower on West 3rd and Superior Avenue will be removed, and new pedestrian lighting will be designed for this project. The pedestrian lighting adjacent to the surface parking lot along Superior and West 6th Street will remain to keep a consistent language with the existing warehouse district. The poles, lights, and power lines along Frankfurt will all be removed and/or buried as needed to maintain CPP functionality while making way for a new design along that street. Next slide. On the garage site, again, we're planning to uphold CPP's street lighting design. We are also removing or burying the brown wooden utility poles and associated power lines to keep the site clean and maintain CPP functionality. Frankfurt specifically will be cleared to make way for the project's design concept. Existing pedestrian poles, again in orange around the site, are intended to remain to speak that same language as the surrounding district. The only exception to that are the 2 pedestrian poles on West 3rd, immediately adjacent to the garage building, which we plan to remove to accommodate the parking garage entrance and remove obstructions from view to the ground level retail bays. Next slide. So now for the new lighting design that we will be installing as part of this project. As we go through this, you'll see fixture thumbnails on the right side of the page that are intended to indicate our design concept for the specific fixtures as they are referenced on plan. So on the pavilion site here, there are consistent Y5 poles or Y5 heads with Z6 poles on all sides at the 2 major sidewalks coming from Public Square leading to the east entrance of the pavilion. These are what we are referring to as our pedestrian light poles, and they are designed to comfortably illuminate these sidewalk and pedestrian faces to enhance the feeling of security around the site. Supplemental lighting at the site is also provided by bollards type BB1 here in the planting areas and adjustable floodlights type BC1 at the large open green space on the southeast corner of the site where that monument signage is going that Sheila just presented. Next slide. On the tower site, we're again using the Y5 heads and Z6 poles for pedestrian lighting at the sidewalks along Frankfurt, West 3rd, and Superior, where adjacent to the building. Where we don't show those Y5 heads is where those existing pedestrian lights on the site are intended to remain. We are adding street lighting to Frankfurt Avenue with the Y3 heads, which will just be a kind of a larger version of the Y5 pedestrian lights that have a higher light output for that street. And then the surface parking lot shows Z2 poles with Y2 heads that are designed to provide more uniform illumination throughout that parking lot and provide light levels as well that promote feelings of safety and security out there. Next slide. On the garage site, we're continuing with the same Y2 heads for the surface parking lot. Pedestrian lighting on the west, north, and east sides of the block is not shown, again, because we are utilizing those existing fixtures on the site. The north side of Frankfurt is going to be employing a more unique lighting strategy, which we are using to enhance the pedestrian experience along that sidewalk. So first, we have the WF2 luminaires shown, which are building mounted to the garage facade and will illuminate the specific storytelling panels that Sheila shared about at the first level of that facade. The XLC1 luminaires shown are our custom light columns that will march consistently down the street, alternating with the trees that the landscape team is designing. These will have vertical illumination on 2 sides, as indicated kind of by the very small arrows here on the screen. So that will have the illumination running parallel with the sidewalk and the path of travel there. These light columns will both provide pedestrian lighting on that sidewalk and create a fun experience for pedestrians passing through, because the lighting inside of the columns will be fully customizable RGBW lighting. So that will allow the owner to have the flexibility to create custom dynamic scenes along Frankfurt or integrate it into the tower, crown, and notch lighting scenes to create a consistent language across the entire site. And with that, that is the conclusion of our package today. So I will go ahead and pass it back over to the commission.
Thank you. Director Wong, before we move on to the public comment, are there other parts of the presentation that are from the applicant that we need to hear before we open it up?
Broadly, this was, reviewed pretty thoroughly yesterday at design review, and most of the design review members signed off. As you were walking through today, Sheila, actually, I'm wondering if you could go back to the neighborhood slides. If you could walk through each of the neighborhoods that are represented, it would be helpful for the commission, I think, to hear a little bit more from that and see who's been included. And that's kind of my only note after the meeting yesterday.
Okay. So within this at the moment, keeping in mind that this is still conceptual at this point, we do have opportunity to develop this quite a bit further. But right now we currently have Ohio City, University Circle, Little Italy, Gordon Square, Cam's Quarter, Lee Harvard, Tremont, Slavic Village, and Downtown. So again, we can certainly take a look at incorporating more neighborhoods. These are quite large panels, so if we need to have more neighborhoods than just the 9, I think that's feasible. I think the other thing is, as we work with the Sherwin staff to really hone in on different areas that Sherwin has intersected with Cleveland, that might also expand the number of neighborhoods that we have as well. So I would say that this is the one thing that is certainly developing, and the goal really is to include as many areas within Cleveland as possible.
Okay, thank you. Okay, commission members, we are going to take a few public comments. I'm going to ask that the staff, because I don't know who's going to speak, identify those that will speak. But a little bit about the rules for the public comment. Before you speak, we ask that you give your name, state your name clearly and your organization or your address. I'm going to ask that you keep your statement to 3 minutes or less so we can hear from the few people who have wanted to speak today. And please remember to address the chair when making your comments and limit your comments to the specific proposal before the commission today. So with that, I'm going to ask staff to identify the first speaker.
Chair Curry, I'll go ahead and call on those who are present.
Okay.
So I see Mr. Jeff Barge is present. Mr. Barge,
Hi.
would you be willing to unmute yourself?
Yeah, this is Jeff Barge. I live in the Edgewater neighborhood. I did have something. You mentioned that different areas of concerns about the design. And one thing I wanted to point out was that Cleveland is a food truck, kind of has a food truck culture. So in terms of considering benching, you may want to assume that there will be food trucks driving up in front of the building once it's open. And the second thing I'd like to point out is that Cleveland is kind of a water city, and it would be nice to have some kind of reference made back to water, even if that's just a reflecting pool in front of the signage, the big Sherwin-Williams sign we saw. And then finally, I would just like to suggest that 2 things, that there should be a water fountain and maybe a biking station with an air pump, but certainly a water fountain because we have a very active bike trails being developed. And you might want to consider having Wi-Fi in the plaza. And that's my phone, sorry. And that's all I've got to say.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
Any
you.
other comments? And then we are also going to then hear the staff comments, but first I want to have the public comment first. Anyone else, Director Vaughn?
Yes, I see Miss Patty Kellner on the line. Patty, if you wouldn't mind unmuting.
Yes, thank you, Joyce. My name is Patty Kellner. I'm a family doctor serving on the east side of Cleveland for 30 plus years. I'm now retired, and I am here as a president of the Kirtland Bird Club and the leader of a bird conservation coalition that formed to address bird safety and habitat issues in Cleveland, greater Cleveland, that is. And I appreciate this opportunity to speak, and I appreciate that the Design Review Committee made this possible back in November when they put a contingency on Sherwin-Williams approval plan to address the bird safety and conservation concerns. Sherwin-Williams had knew about some of these concerns, because a group of bird watchers who monitor bird safety in downtown Cleveland had brought them to their attention, and Sherwin-Williams had hired an avian consultant to address those concerns. And we weren't sure that at that point that the avian consultant was addressing the right concerns. The concerns are that Cleveland is a hub for migratory birds, and the migratory birds that come through Cleveland come through in spring and fall. Most people don't know, but they migrate at night. And these are tropical birds that spend their winters in the tropics and then migrate north to Cleveland, and then farther north, some of them to Canada. What happens during migration is they are attracted by light at night, and cities are big attractants, Cleveland in particular. And then they in the morning they roost in greenery outside buildings like the proposed Sherwin-Williams Tower, or the planned. And in the morning, when they get ready to fly, they fly into reflective windows, thinking they're flying towards the trees and greenery that are outside the buildings. So a way to mitigate this is to put a specialized glass into the lower stories of the building, a kind of glass called fritted glass, and to also turn the lights out at night. And I'm glad to hear that there will be ongoing discussion, and I hope we can work with the avian consultants and Sherwin-Williams to keep birds safe at night, so that Cleveland is not known as a good source of dead birds for researchers, which is the situation now, but is known as a bird-friendly city for the health of the people of Cleveland, the enjoyment, the health of the planet. Thank you.
Thank you, Patty. Appreciate your comments. Director Wong, any additional speakers?
I see Mr. Angelo Trevisano has his hand raised.
Okay.
Hi, everyone. Angelo Trevisano, 2915J in Cleveland. This comment is to support all the current and future Sherwin-Williams and contractor employees that will want to ride bicycles to the headquarters. It's also World Bicycle Day today, so talking about bike parking is timely. My comment today is a request to provide far more parking space for people with bicycles. Right now, it looks like at least the site and amenities plans call for, honestly, just the bare minimum and no bicycle directionals. I couldn't find dimension or interior details for the bike parking in today's presentation that was provided online. So it's unclear how easy or secure or even enticing any of it will be to future users. I've also previously this year studied the bike parking standards of 70 other similar cities to see how Cleveland compares. And what's provided for bicycles here is woefully insufficient for buildings of national and global importance. Some of you may have also heard the stat that 25% of Clevelanders do not have reliable access to private motor vehicles, and that this number is likely higher and growing in many neighborhoods, especially with many young people not giving driver's license now. If we wish to include all Clevelanders in the economic and job opportunities that this project presents, then we must ensure that appropriate transportation infrastructure is provided to meet the needs of those who do not drive or live near reliable public transportation. I also want to share that in recent national surveys, Black and Hispanic respondents report that a lack of secure bicycle parking is the #1 barrier, preventing them from using a bicycle more often for transportation. Not speeding drivers, not weather, not anything else, but the security of their property. My specific request is that this project require 360 bicycle parking spaces within a ground level secure room, either in the parking structure or within the main tower, and 7 clusters of 4 bike racks each distributed within 50 feet of the 7 primary building entrances. I did send in plans on Wednesday, so I tried to do as much of the work as possible for everyone, and it includes dimensions and parts. So I think there will be maybe an opportunity to look at that sometime in the future. In conclusion, Sherwin-Williams predicts that 3,900 current and new jobs will be served by this project. So providing this increased space for bicycles, about 10% of the employees, is an appropriate starting point to serve both the workforce and other visitors and customers expected to use this area of downtown. with construction of new bicycle routes and complete streets infrastructure imminent, along with changing financial and environmental costs of motor vehicle ownership. The necessity of more bicycle parking has never been more critical to the city. Thank you, everyone. I know you're all putting in long hours to bring this project to life. Thank you.
Thank you, Angela. Appreciate that. Okay, last call for any additional comments.
I wanted to mention that Don Pettit also has a brief summary of all the written comments that we received.
Okay.
Don, would you go ahead and summarize?
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair and Director. We received 12 emails total during the past week, including Mr. Barge's and Mr. Trevisano's. They largely fell into three categories. The first one was streetscape seating and transit. Mr. Barge, of course, would like to see more seating opportunities. Alex Rubin, who represents the coordinating committee of the Clevelanders for Public Transit, believes that Superior Avenue is one of the busiest transit waiting environments in the state. Riders demand comfort and dignity when waiting for the bus. Sherwin-Williams needs to include expanded shelter and additional seating, as well as rider necessities like more trash cans. The second category fell into urban design. Generally, Paulette Colorocchio felt that there were too many surface parking lots in the plan and not enough landscaping to hide the ocean of cars. The remaining letters all came regarding the bird friendliness of the project. We had 8 emails, including Patty Kellner, and I think she very eloquently summarized all the concerns of the group. All of the comments are consistent with the comments we received last year when we reviewed the project. They all encourage bird-friendly glass, that the building be bird safe, that there be a commitment to keep all but necessary lights off at night during spring and fall migrations, and that they also encourage mandatory bird safe building practices and materials in new construction. And that's the extent of all the public comment.
Thank you, Don. Appreciate it. So I believe we're going to close the public portion of the meeting and ask commission members from either commission, so landmarks or planning, to just please raise your hand. And I see August has his hand raised, so we'll go to him first. And then I see Councilman Schleif. So we'll just really follow who has raised their hands to speak. So feel free, commission members, both to make comments and or to ask questions of the applicant. Commission member Fluker, you are first.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes.
2 comments. Relative to the neighborhoods identified, I think Sherwin-Williams needs to try harder to include a more diverse depiction of our city. We know about the big 3 or 4, but I think there's the missed opportunity to celebrate the very diverse and rich culture throughout the city. The second item, quite frankly, is in my all good conscience, Madam Chair, to the applicant, I don't feel comfortable approving lighting or signage without seeing everything, which I consider urban design. And there's just too many holes there, in my opinion, to see how all this is integrated. They're all inextricably connected. And to approve one thing and walk away and say come back with the other, I just think is short-sighted. I think we need to see the full palette of what they plan to do. And lastly, and most importantly, this is not the first time we've had this conversation with Sherwin-Williams. It's been several meetings, and we keep asking them to be more intentional about urban design. I don't know, either they don't get it, and it is not a slight, or they need a little more direction from staff. So I just wanted to point those things out, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Schleif.
I'll be very brief, just because my initial comment had also been about the neighborhood selected, and just to kind of lay it all out for the design team. you know, we've seen enough projects on planning commission where people talk about Cleveland neighborhoods, and it always ends up being kind of the same couple neighborhoods that are being gentrified, that are, you know, high market and not really reflective of the entire city, and especially the fact that we are a majority minority city. So I appreciate that the intent of it is to show how Sherwin-Williams interlinks with different parts of the city. I just hope that there's, if there's a necessity for it, a little due diligence to kind of cover parts of the city that aren't those trendy neighborhoods. That's I think what, speaking at least for myself, maybe some others, that's what kind of raised the red flag, and then that's what we're probably hoping to see. So thanks.
Thank you, Councilman. I think next, I see Carter Edmond.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I'd like to add my endorsement to the comments about the neighborhood representation. That really stood out to me. I'd like to comment specifically on the two options of the signage designs. And I just think that between the two, the second option with the fan deck angled out just strikes me as much more dynamic, engaging, alive, and interesting, and also seems to fit with some of the tectonics of the building and the angles that they look like are being represented in the site layout and so forth. So I think that's if option two is an evolution from option one, I think it's a really good evolution. I would encourage them to continue to explore that. Thank you.
Thank you. Commission Member McCray Scott.
Yes, thank you. I concur with my colleagues. I think one thing that's really missing, that they need to have something that represents the first African American mayor in the city of Cleveland, Carl, and his brother Louis Stokes, their community, where they were born right here in the city of Cleveland. So the neighborhood representation stood out to me for sure. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions from the commission members? Giancarlo?
Yes, thank you. I agree with the comments that have already been made by our fellow commissioners. To me, I think, you know, this is this building will in all likelihood be the last building on public square. So I'm very concerned with the comments that were made and how it relates. There's a language, I think, that to me is intriguing, how it relates to itself and how it relates to public square in the city of Cleveland. You know, we talked about diversity and landscaping and parking. And I haven't heard much how it actually relates to the entire public square concept as a, you know, I was just in Spain, and the public spaces are so critical in Europe, and they're not only are we building a new building, a new concept, but we're also integrating a concept into the square. So the lighting, the landscaping, the parking lot, the comments were made about somehow hiding these parking lots, not in a bad way, but to make them more interesting and more integral to the public space. More landscaping, maybe even some landscaping inside the parking lot itself. I know we're always critical about actually having an extra space or two, but one of the most disturbing things when you go to a public parking lot is there's no shadow, no shading, no really conservation elements. It's just a place to park your car. And it might be okay in shopping centers, but in a place like Public Square and an historical concept of the city of Cleveland, I think all those considerations should be discussed, talked about, and somehow integrated into the project. I mean, I like to see this building 15, 20 years from now is actually contributing to the entire concept of Cleveland's Public Square.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? I'm actually gonna, if there aren't, I'm gonna ask that you put the slide back to the sort of items or the motions that was at the beginning, just so we understand what is being asked of the commission today. So site amenities and landscaping will be coming back. They are here for signage and lighting separately. So there, yes. So also do want to point out that the lighting was approved as presented from the design review. Signage was approved with conditions. And can we see the conditions again for the signage? And I do have a question, since on the signage, these were both for final approval, but I did hear that the murals were for conceptual approval. So I do think that there's an opportunity to approve the locations of those murals and the strategy for them along that street frontage, but not necessarily the content. So I just want to kind of, based on the comments, there is an assumption that we are not approving the exact content as it sits today.
So Madam Chair, as Sheila had mentioned, yeah, the concept is where we're headed, like the final communities, the final actual historical things that are highlighted, whether it be a building or a birthplace or some sort of intersection between the city of Cleveland and Sherwin-Williams, is still being worked through with the Sherwin-Williams communication team and their archivists. So I guess we could handle that two different ways. We could come back with like the final, or we could work through staff on what the final content is in the actual story and the actual neighborhood that's mentioned. And again, that will be something that's evolutionary as we dig into all of those stories and determine their relevance in the overall story that's being told on Frankfurt Avenue.
Okay, so let's take the lighting first, and I'm going to ask the commission members if you want to go back to that motion, if anyone would like to discuss the if you can go back to the slide about the lighting. Yes, about the motion for the lighting. And ask commission members if we have a motion or a second or any other request.
I move approval on the lighting elements, Downing.
A second. Okay, Scott.
Thanks. We have a motion and a second. Any other comments or questions before we vote? Okay, so we're going to call a joint roll. So I think, Don, you're likely to do this. So we can call the roll.
Thank you. Anderson.
Yes.
Kalikia.
Yes.
Downing. Dreyer.
Yes.
Edmund.
Yes.
Fluker.
No.
Long.
Yes.
Curry.
Yes.
McCray Scott.
Yes.
Slife.
Yes.
Strickland.
Yes.
Tarasik.
Yes.
Madam Chair, the motion carries with 1 no vote.
Okay, thank you. Second, we're going to talk about the signage. So if you, can go back to that sheet with the conditions. Here we are. I'm going to ask commission members for a motion here. I would ask that if we're going to make a motion to approve with the conditions, that we either have the actual content come back to staff or come back to the commission, one or the other, and as this is developing.
Madam Chair, I will move to approve with the conditions listed and ask that the work on this come back to staff for review and approval.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
This is Director Huang. I'll put in my second.
Okay, so basically what we're saying here is that the signage is being approved with the conditions of the shorter base or of a short base being added, and I think the comment we also heard from this commission about the preference for the paint chip signage scheme, and that the murals and the content actually come back to staff. And I think that the director and her staff will do a great job in understanding the need and the reason to celebrate all of Cleveland's culture and history. So I think we are designating that work to be done with staff.
Madam Chair, do we need to integrate that into the motion then? Those.
Yes, I think that was what, if I'm correct, that was added to the motion, that comes to staff already. Let's have a little bit of additional comment or question.
Madam Chair, that was my intention. I can, if we need to state it more clearly in the motion, I would ask that the murals come back to staff for their review, and with the intention of celebrating all of Cleveland's neighborhoods, its history, and its rich culture and diversity.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. Any further discussion or comment?
Chair Curry, just to clarify, so the motion is to approve both options, and then we would come back and let the commission know which option we selected, one or two.
Staff, you will let staff know.
Okay.
And you'll work with staff on the content of the murals. So those do have to come back to staff. If you cannot come to agreement with the staff on those items, you do have the right to come back to the commission. But if you can work with the director and you have agreement on the murals and the content, then you do not have to come back to staff, to the commission.
Thank you.
Okay.
Madam Chair, Mr. Strickland has his hand raised.
Sure. Mr. Strickland?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to clarify, in your description of the motion, I heard you say that the paint chip option was the preference. And just a point of clarification, I think it's the fan deck. It was described as the fan deck option. That is the preference of the majority of the commission members, including myself. Thank you.
Yeah, I think, although maybe there's an error, there were only two options. So I assumed that the paint chip was the fan because the static was.
I'm sorry, it's Lily. The
Am I
two
correct?
options are the paint chip, which is the vertical option, and then the fan deck, which is the angled option. The comments we heard here are consistent with the comments we heard yesterday. Both were approved with the preference being the fan deck. So, I think we understand that, and there just may be some logistical things that we need to work through to then come back with the final. So we've understood that fan deck has been preferred from both the committees and the commission.
Okay, so I'm going to just clarify that was my assumption as well of what this meant. So the preference of both design review and this commission was the fan deck. You work that out. If that's where you go, you just come back to staff to clarify that is what you've selected. If you change, then you do have to come back to the commission. Does that make sense?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so, yeah.
The commission, I think design review and this commission has a preference for that option. And we're stating that if you go with that option, then you just come back to staff.
That makes sense.
Okay. All right, if there's no other comments or questions, Don, let's call the roll.
Anderson,
Yes.
Kalikia,
Yes.
Downing,
Yes.
Dreyer,
Yes.
Edmund,
Yes.
Fluker,
No.
Wong,
Yes.
Curry,
Yes.
McCray Scott,
No,
Slight,
Yes.
Strickland,
Yes.
Tarasik.
Yes.
Madam Chair, the motion carries with 2 no votes.
Okay. All right, motion carries. And we will see you back then for the landscaping and seating and the additional items that you're working on. I would say that to Commissioner Fluker's comment, it would be important when you come back to show those items that you actually incorporate these in how you show them, so we understand how the urban design and the landscape plan and the seating, et cetera, also do relate to, especially the ground mounted signage and other aspects of that were presented today. So we see the incorporation of them. Okay.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all. And we are now going to actually, I believe, close out the Joint Commission and move to our regular agenda. So I want to thank the Landmarks Commission for joining us today. You're welcome anytime. So thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
To echo my thanks, thank you, Landmarks Commission. Of which, just for public note, I am on the Landmarks Commission by ordinance, so that is why I was able to vote today.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Here we go.
Okay, I think we're gonna actually call the roll separately now and then I think if you're okay, we're probably gonna read also the preamble again, because this is a separate meeting. So it's kind of backwards, but go ahead and maybe, I think I did it backwards before. So read the preamble first, then we'll call the roll.
No problem, Chair Curry. In compliance with notification requirements of Ohio's open meeting law and section 101.021 of the codified ordinances of Cleveland, Ohio, 1976, notice of this meeting has been publicly posted. All boards and commissions under the purview of the City Planning Department conducts its meetings according to Robert's Rules of Order. Actions during the meeting will be taken by voice vote. Abstentions from any vote due to a conflict of interest should be stated for the record prior to the taking of any vote. In order to ensure that everyone participating in the meeting has the opportunity to be heard, we ask that you use the raise hand feature before asking a question or making a comment. The raise hand feature can be found in the participants panel on the desktop and mobile version and activated by clicking the hand icon. Please wait for the chair or facilitator to recognize you and be sure to select unmute and announce yourself before you speak. When finished speaking, please lower your hand by clicking on the raised hand icon again and mute your microphone. We will also be utilizing the chat feature to communicate with participants. The chat feature can be activated by clicking the chat button located on the bottom of the WebEx screen, and any call-in users can unmute by using *6. All meeting activity is being recorded via the WebEx platform. These proceedings are also being live streamed via YouTube. All requests to speak on a particular matter via our website and email have been considered. We have also received emails from those who have provided written comment on a particular matter.
Okay, let's call the roll.
Downing. Mark.
Present.
Fluker,
Yes.
Curry,
Present.
McCray Scott,
Yes.
Paul, Slife.
Present.
Okay, we have a quorum. Let's go to the first matter. Okay, we have zoning map amendment, which is actually public rezoning matter. So this will actually be a public hearing, and we'll ask that staff report on the rezoning and answer questions of the commission. Then we will take sponsor testimony. So those who may be here, in addition to staff, if it's a requested rezoning. And then we will take public comment. Since this is a public hearing, we'll take testimony first from proponents and then from opponents second. If you're going to give any comment, we ask that you state your name clearly and or your address. And you must keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to staff to make a presentation first.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Matt Moss. I'm a city planner with the Planning Commission, and I'll be taking you through this map change presentation this morning. So this is map change 2648. This is a proposal to map a 6-foot front yard setback on Roanoke Avenue between State Road and West 30th. Next slide, please. And the purpose of this is to permit infill housing development on Roanoke Avenue in the Old Brooklyn neighborhood. Next slide. So just as a refresher, front, rear, and side yard setbacks are required for all main buildings in residential districts. In general, in residential districts, the required front yard setback is 15% of the lot depth. In this case, on Roanoke in this block, that's roughly 14 feet. There are provisions where homes are allowed to align to a closer setback if existing homes on the street are closer. But as you'll see in a second on Roanoke, there are quite a variety of setbacks, and we have some proposals in this neighborhood to do some infill housing that are struggling to comply with this part of the zoning code. And BZA, the Board of Zoning Appeals, is limited in its ability by our zoning code to grant variances to the front yard setback regulations. Next slide. So again, a front yard setback space is a required setback where no structures can be located. Encroachments are permitted, things like porches are allowed, but in general, buildings cannot be built within that space. They're either required by code or indicated on the zoning map. They take precedence over other setback regulations and can only be changed with legislation. Next slide. So this is a context shot. We're sort of right in the middle of the Old Brooklyn neighborhood. Next slide. And then this is a close-up of the proposed map change. Again, what we're simply looking to do here is with legislation, map a new setback, which would be closer to the street, closer than the average setback that's on the street. Next slide. Here's some context shots of Roanoke. We've worked with the applicant here. Kinez Homes is looking to build a few infill houses here. So they've done some analysis of the setbacks. And as you can see from one end of the street, this is towards State Road looking east. The setbacks here are sort of all over the place. There are homes that are built right up to the street or within a few feet, and there are some homes that are set back more than 10 feet. Next slide. And this is the other end of the block. So this is from behind us would be West 30th looking west. And so again, you can see the variation, not just in setback, but also in frontage features. Some homes have stoops, some have full front porches, some are of various heights. So there's a lot of variety on this street. Next slide. This is a diagram showing roughly where you can see that setback line. You can see how homes either are much farther back or much closer. Right now, you can see this diagram was provided to us by Kinez Homes. It shows their site plans roughly of how they would fit in and their difficulty in complying with the current setback regulations. And so if we map a 6-foot setback, it would not only allow these homes to be built, but it would facilitate future infill development while still providing a setback space where we can maintain that character of the street, but also permit things like front porches. Next slide. And that's a summary of the change. Again, it's pretty straightforward. We're just looking to map a setback on this street. We want to see how the homes here will infill, and then we'll probably take a look at some other streets in the Old Brooklyn neighborhood, again, in partnership with the CDC and the Councilman's office. Again, the reason why we feel like it's important here to facilitate this type of infill development in Old Brooklyn is an effort to try to bring on more comparable properties to increase sale prices and add more value to the housing market here in Old Brooklyn. So happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Appreciate it. So I don't know if there's any sponsored testimony of a council person or anyone else. Do you know, Matt? Or
Yeah, the councilperson sent in written support. I know he had a complicated schedule this morning, so I don't think he's able to join us.
He's actually on. Councilman Harsh is
Oh, you
on.
are? Oh, great. Thank you.
Yeah, everything Matt said, 100% I agree with. It's really important for our neighborhood. We have some missing teeth, if you will. We did get devastated by demolitions, but being able to put some new houses in these empty lots is going to help our neighborhood tremendously. I think this is new construction number 4 and 5 in the 21st century. So it's really important for us to sort of get some of these empty lots filled in, and the setback allows us to do that. So I absolutely and enthusiastically support this.
okay, thank you very much. Just a question to Matt. Are we proposing this for just this street? Does that make, I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, that's right. This is just proposed in this block that you see between State Road and West 30th.
Okay, and why not, since I can see from this that there are a few other kind of empty lots, like, why not do a few more blocks at once so that it sort of isn't just relating to this specific proposal, but to the fact that you would want maybe a kind of area to have this new zoning?
Yeah, I think we do want to look at more blocks. We just at a previous meeting implemented the last phase of the Old Brooklyn rezoning. So we had done some comprehensive rezonings in Old Brooklyn with then Councilman Kelly, and the third phase we just took through Planning Commission. That was actually in Ward 12. And so now that those comprehensive rezonings of the corridors are moving forward, it makes sense to then look at the internal blocks here. You can see there's some discrepancy already on the zoning map between the 2-family zoning, the 1-family zoning, even though the actual structures and the character of the neighborhood probably isn't that different. And in other cases on other streets, it's possible to either grant relief by right, the way our code works, from these regulations, the specific regulation, or through the variance process, because BZA can grant a variance, but they're very limited in their ability to do so. They can only grant a variance based on a formula in the code that requires drawing lines and calculating setbacks based on existing structures. So on some streets, we don't need legislative relief in order to permit infill housing. But on a street like Roanoke, on this part of Roanoke at least, where there is such a variation in the setback, conflicting with the minimum requirements of the code, that's where we need a legislative solution. So I think it makes sense though that we need to look proactively as we're seeing more infill housing proposals coming in Old Brooklyn.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. That actually makes sense. My question was just like directly across the street won't have the same setback, but I only see one parcel there that is, so you're saying basically there's a consistency across the street in terms of where the setback is. So there's more leeway to approve, let's say, an infill housing on that one lot because of the consistency. Is that correct?
That's right.
Okay, that's very, very helpful. Okay, so before we open it up to the commission, I'm going to ask for any public testimony. First, I'm going to ask anybody in favor of this zoning change, proponents, to speak first. Please just raise your hand and staff will call on you. And I think I see one besides August, which is Lucas Reeve. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct, Madam Chair and Commission members. My name is Lucas Reeve. I'm a resident of the Old Brooklyn neighborhood and also interim director, executive director at the Old Brooklyn CDC. I just wanted to add to the commentary this morning that we are in full support of the proposed setback map changes. This infill housing that is being proposed here is incredibly important to the neighborhood. This street is directly adjacent to our main commercial corridor, the Brighton corridor. And this particular sub-market from a residential standpoint is one of the more challenged markets in our neighborhood. So this infill housing is incredibly important to the resurgence and continued vitality of this part of our neighborhood. And I just wanted to add that we're in full support and hope that you'll consider it.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate the comments. Anyone else here to speak in favor of the zoning change? Okay, I don't see any hands. Anyone opposed to the zoning change who would like to make a comment or ask a question or anything? Just raise your hand. Okay. I don't see anyone with their hands raised, so we're going to close the public portion of the meeting and ask commission members if they'd like to speak. And I think August, you have your hand raised. Commission member Fluker, question?
Can you hear me?
Yes, now we can.
I'm sorry. Madam Chair, to Matt Moss, I commend you creating this process because it's tough. My question, sort of piggybacking on Madam Chair's question, is could this tool be used in other neighborhoods? For example, I know CHN Housing Partners and others in the city develop scatter site tax credit infill housing, and we always get into a challenge with some staff concerning inches, and then we get our plats done, then they ask us to move the house 6 inches, and I'm not being facetious or or I'm not embellishing this. So I think this tool, until such time we have a better process, could be applied in other neighborhoods. Could you opine on that, Matt? Thank you.
Yeah, to the chair and Commission Member Fluker, I would say we definitely can, and I think we try to work proactively where we have the opportunity to in terms of adjusting our current code. I think this has been I think an important issue too as we look towards the form-based code pilot, and this is something, and these types of rules are something we've tried to address proactively in drafting that pilot code to no longer require this as a hardship or a regulation that we often have to spend staff and commission time, quite frankly, to deviate from in order to get the kinds of projects we know have to be built. I think part of what this is responding to is also just the change in housing product that is desirable on the market. Part of the reason why we have this struggle is some of the housing products need to be larger to have sufficient bathrooms, sufficient bedroom space. And so that's why it's difficult to comply with some of these area regulations of the code. So I think in the short term with setback legislation, we can look proactively. It's pretty easy to do. But a long-term, our ideal long-term goal would be through the form-based code, which would totally reform how setback regulations work and what they're trying to achieve.
Well, Madam Chair, hearing no other questions or comments, I'd like to move to approve the changes as presented.
And I'll second.
Right, we have a motion and a second. Any additional comment? Mine is just to echo Commission Member Fluker's, and thank you, Matt. I agree. This is just good stuff. And so bring us more. All right, let's call the roll.
Downing,
Yes.
Fluker,
Yes.
Curry,
Yes.
McCray Scott,
Yes.
Paul, Slife,
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you, Councilman.
I thank you, and New Brooklyn thanks you.
Yes, thank you. Okay, this is a new townhouse development in a two-family district. I need a little clarification on this one about just if this is a zoning matter or public hearing, or if we're just hearing this from staff. Director Wong, could you just clarify just to make sure I follow guidelines?
It's a good question. Looking to Assistant Director Fields and Matt Moss, who will be presenting. This is regarding the townhouse code that was adopted. So speaking to it is a zoning matter. Oh, Shannon's on. Okay. Zoning matter, yes.
Okay. I would prefer to err on the public comment side anyway, so I was going to err that direction. So I just want to make sure. Okay, so once again, this is a public hearing, and so staff will present. We'll hear sponsor testimony once again, and then we will take public comment. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Matt.
Great, thank you, Madam Chair. So I have a brief introduction that I can share just so we can all be on the same page, and just to remind you what the guidelines and standards are that we'll be reviewing this under. Next slide, please. So this is a use approval for townhouse use in a two-family district. Based on the way our townhouse code is written, the Planning Commission has to approve the use as townhomes in single and two-family zoning districts. Next slide. So again, this is just restating what I said. In that single and two-family zoning districts, the Planning Commission has to approve the uses permitted. Next slide. So these are the standards in the code under which the Planning Commission is directed to decide whether the use is appropriate. So whether it's visually compatible with nearby properties, things like scale, height, setbacks, orientation, architectural character, roof materials are all important. And then the site layout, building structures, landscape features arranged in a way to create visual interest, promote safety and security, comfortable pedestrian circulation, vehicular circulation, all these things are important. Next slide. The last two are building features. So the features shall contribute to the character of the neighborhood. So again, the context in which these townhomes are located is important. And then finally, circulation and parking. So that the circulation parking shall provide proper access for service and safety vehicles, minimize conflicts between pedestrians and vehicles, minimize curb cuts, maximize on-street parking. Those two really go hand in hand, and prohibits placement of garage doors so close to sidewalks as to impair pedestrian safety. Next slide. So this is a site that you may be familiar with. We reviewed this probably a little over a year ago or so. This was a lot split request at the time on Orchard Avenue and West 42nd Street. So this is a context shot showing where it's located in Ohio City. Next slide. This property is squarely in a two-family zoning district. At the time, the owner, this parcel is an old church. It was combined with a two-family home adjacent to it that spanned the block between West 42nd Place and West 42nd Street. We reviewed the lot split at that time in order to make sure that where the final property line was drawn would permit appropriate code compliant development of both properties based on the building code and the fire code. Next slide. So here's a shot of the corner. This is the church in question. It's in a state of general disrepair. I'll let the applicant speak to that in more detail. And so now they're looking to renovate this into townhomes. Next slide. Again, here's a shot looking eastward down Orchard. So just to give you a sense of the character of this street, there are a variety of homes here, single family homes, duplexes, some small multifamily buildings. And in fact, on West 42nd, there's also an older townhouse project that's currently existing. And this is right across the street from the Orchard School. Next slide. And now I'll turn it over to the applicant. This is their presentation and site plans, and they can provide you with that updated information. I think we have Leon Sampat on the call.
How you doing? Leon Sampat with LS Architects, 22082 Lorraine Road, Fairview Park, Ohio. So yeah, this is a unique property. It was a former church. It's actually been vacant for the last 14 years. We are proposing to convert it into 4 townhouses. We're looking at 3 1,650 square foot units with 2 bedrooms, and then 1 unit that's a little larger. That would be at the east end of the site, and that one would be approximately 2,400 square feet. We have proposed a garage and curb cuts at the south end of the structure with the entrances at the north. If you go to the next slide. As Matt mentioned, this is the existing church. It is in somewhat disrepair. The roof has not been leaking for long, so the structure's in fairly good shape structure-wise, but it does need a lot of work. The slate roof will have to come off. There is not a lot of tuck pointing. There's a chimney that's in real disrepair at the the northwest corner of the property. But overall, the masonry is in good shape. It's really all the fenestration that will need some work. If you go to the next slide. That's just existing 2-dimensional elevation. Next slide. That's existing conditions. Next. Existing conditions. Next. This is the current existing floor plan. This was actually the actual congregation met on the 2nd floor. The ground floor plan was more ancillary space. So that does make this a little bit more of a difficult site to be reused for another church purpose. If you go to the next slide, this is actually the 2nd level. It is about approximately 11 feet off of grade. So to get people up to this level for services, it's very difficult. You can actually see, I'm not quite sure how they actually even access the restrooms. There's only about a 2-foot corridor getting to each restroom. So the use as a church, and I think that's what it's been, in the past it was used for. Even I think 14 years ago was the last time it was utilized. But I think at that point, even they felt that this wasn't a good use of space for their congregation, so they left. Next slide. This is what we were proposing. for the south elevation. So we showing the new garage doors at the south. We are looking at 4 dormers at the north and south end of the structure. That's giving us the opportunity to add another floor to giving us garages on the first level, the main living area on the second level, and then the third level would be our bedrooms. Next slide. So we are looking at repurposing all the openings. We bring them back with glass, operable glass, and there will be some spandrel glass. You can kind of see through this plan where the floor line cuts through some of the top of the arches. So those would not be operable. They'll just be spandrel. Behind some of the plywood or even the exposed windows right now, they look like stained glass, but they are not. They're actually just they're filmed glass. So our intent is to actually replace all of the existing windows, and even at the lower elevation, currently those 2 windows are just masonry infills. We would take the masonry infill out and replace it with windows. Next slide. This would be the north elevation. So we were proposing patios on the main living level, the entrance doors on the lower level, and then the new dormers. And then, yeah, of course, staining the entire, retuck pointing and staining the entire exterior of the structure. Next slide. So this is the proposed ground level plan. So we're looking at tandem car garages. Again, with the entrances to the north. This unit on the east side, the first unit, what we're calling it, unit 1, does have a little efficiency suite on there, along with 3 other bedrooms for that unit. Next slide. This is the main living area. So we are looking at living room, kitchen, bathroom, laundry on the first level, and then the new patios. The 3 units are fairly consistent with the layouts, and then the 4th unit to the east is a little larger. Next slide. Here we've got 2 bedrooms on the 3 units to the left, and then master bath and a full bath on this level. This would be the rendering of what we're proposing. This is showing the garages on the south side. Next slide. Another view of the entry court. So this would be the entry court, is what we're looking at proposing. The decks with the entrance doors below. And then they'd have a shared common walkway there. Next slide. Another view of this. Next slide. I believe that's so. In talking with Matt, in trying to keep in tune with the townhouse code, we have been looking at his. I guess part of his major concern was that we don't fall under the development code with the entrances and the garages. So we have actually looked at trying to make it work. If you go back to the site plan, so what we've actually looked at doing is essentially flipping this layout and trying to get the garages at the north elevation and the entrances to the south. We have 14 feet of property from our building to our property line. My original concern was that was just too tight to make it work. With the redesign that we looked at, and a civil engineer we've been in contact with, Mr. Matt Weber. He has actually done similar type projects. He actually worked on the 9 and the county building. And I guess there's an alley at that location that's 15'8" wide with overhead doors on each side of it. And with a wider door, he feels that we can make this work. So if we go from pier to pier on the doors, he feels we'd be able to make that turning radius. So he's actually supposed to look at that and get us a auto turn on that to see if that may be an option for us, which we believe it will be after conversations with him. So if there is a preference that, because I know Mr. Moss stated that to me that it's of their opinion that they would prefer that the drives do not enter on Orchard Avenue, but we would like to understand from the Planning Commission too where they would stand.
Okay, sorry to interrupt you, but my question here then is to staff. I mean, this is zoning matter, and we are approving this use, or the townhouse use. So to staff, just to clarify before we open it up, I think there's obviously going to be a preference for this to be flipped. And you're saying that that's your preference as well. We just don't know the answer. So I'm going to ask, we're still going to take public comment, but I think I'm going to have staff think about this as we do take the comment, which is, to the applicant, would you be open to tabling this, just date certain to 2 weeks until we know that answer? Because I don't want to waste your time and our time, because that is so much more preferable. And I think, we'll be supportive, more supportive of that. So Matt, should we wait 2 weeks to find out the answer? Do you want me to continue?
Yeah, Madam Chair, I can provide some more information on that as well. So I received during the Sherwin-Williams presentation an update from Leon as to the feasibility or potential feasibility of a more code compliant and preferable layout. And so I think because there was clearly not enough time to revise the presentation and there's still some pending questions, he just wants to make sure that there isn't any other concerns that he should be aware of besides the layout, even though that is a really obvious, I think, item on this matter. So
Okay.
that way, when it does come back, he can make sure that that's simply what needs to be addressed, or if there's other things.
Okay. The other option to the commission members is that we approve it with the understanding that it's flipped and you don't have to come back unless that's not the case. Because I don't think we want to also waste your time and make you come back. So I'll leave it to my fellow commission members, but we can also approve it in the desired state. And then you only have to come back if you can't do it. So, but before we get there, I am going to first, since this is a public hearing, we first need to take testimony or public comment from proponents, so those in favor of the zoning matter. And so I'll ask that if you're here to speak, please raise your hand, state your name clearly and your address. And so anyone here in favor of this zoning matter? I don't see any hands raised. So now I'm going to ask, are there any opponents? So those who would like to speak against this zoning matter or have questions, please raise your hand as well. Okay, so I don't see any public comments. I'm going to close the public portion and ask commission members for any discussion or questions.
Madam Chair, I would just like to commend the developer and staff for finding an adaptive reuse for churches. Far too many vacant churches and other structures that could find new lives. And I know this is not simple, but this is awesome. It should be used as a model for developers who out there who want to start tearing things down. So.
Is that a motion to my commission?
Yeah, I would like to approve presentation with the caveat that the intent is to flip the design so that it's a more amenable living environment. If that does not happen, we ask the applicant come back. But I believe my recommendation would be the staff can handle it from here. Thank you.
So a motion.
I'll second.
And a second. Any other comment? All right, let's call the roll.
Downing,
Yes.
Fluker,
Yes.
Curry,
Yes.
McCray Scott,
Yes.
Life,
Yes.
Motion carries. It is a phenomenal project. So, so thank you. And thank you for actually fighting for the flip of the driveways. I mean, I think that's phenomenal, that you are willing to consider that and try to make it work. So thank you. Okay, let's go to the next matter. We now have design review cases. And the first matter is Euclid Corridor, East 90th Street Apartments. This is seeking final approval. This is 1839 East 90th Street. It was approved with conditions, and we'll go to that next page in a second. But first I need to swear anyone in who's going to speak to this matter. Brandon, is there anyone else with you, or are you the only other?
Nope, just me.
Okay. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, as you shall answer to the penalty of perjury?
I do.
Okay, take it away.
This project is located between Addis View, which is currently under construction on East 90th, and the Lumos apartments on East 93rd, which are also presently under construction. This project really will be a kind of a phase 2 expansion of the Lumos with some connectivity to that. I'll try to go through the presentation quickly to be brief and point out the highlights of those aspects. But some context, we're one block inboard basically of the Cleveland Clinic campus and off of Chester. And again, it's kind of on the backside of our client's first project that's currently under construction. Next slide. Here's renderings of those two current projects that are currently under construction as we speak right now. Next slide. It's a 42 unit apartment building, 4 stories. One of the aspects of this would be connecting the Lumos, which is currently under construction, to the parking lot of this. This project does have more parking than requirement by code. We did get a parking variance for the original project, the Lumos, and the two projects combined will allow for a 1-to-1 parking ratio for both buildings. So it would basically meet the standard together instead of the reduced parking count that we had for the first project. Next slide. Studios, 1 bedrooms and 2 bedrooms, 576 square foot to 1,000 square foot building, 4 stories with walk-up units on the ground floor. And then this building will work cohesively with the other buildings. So the amenity area of this building is a little bit more enhanced because the leasing office and fitness centers in the other building. This one has a social room, a theater, and a lounge at the ground floor. Next slide. Some elevations, materials. Some of the materials were changed. We modified the masonry that was proposed in this. We went to a half-height masonry blend, so there's a nice variation. It's not just a single source CMU. It's a little darker to make it a little richer and be a little bit more cohesive with the board and batten black siding. If you go to the next slide. In our landscape plan, again, creating a nice walk-up condition off of East 90th. All the units on the ground floor will have a nice stoop and walk up. And then the landscape beds kind of grade and slope up to those areas as well. So we enhance planning along the fronts of the street. Here's a rendering of the changes and modifications we made to the building from the original. Again, we made some tweaks and modifications to the siding materials and then increased the going to that half height, more brick scaled masonry blend. One of the comments said design review, and I'm not sure if that slide got issued into this or not. I know it was late, but there was a request or a comment by one of the committee members that they wanted to see what the building would look like if the masonry stopped only at the first floor and we extended the black board and batten down that second floor area, extending that down And we issued kind of a modified rendering to the committee yesterday. I'm not sure their responses on which preference they liked. We said that we really would defer to their opinion at that suggestion. Next slide. So here's another view with the Lumos in the background. Next slide. Another view with all the materials. Again, next slide. Then some site lighting. We'll have some perimeter site lighting for the parking lot, wall packs, security wall packs on the sides of the building. Every unit has a balcony or patio at the ground level, and they'll have their own wall sconce and some site lighting, ambient colored lighting that will light the pathways up to the walk-up units as well. Next slide. That was the previous submitted rendering. It had the masonry, you can see it was a lot darker. And some of the changes we made at the cornice work at the parapet and at the entryway, and then also worked on creating landscape beds that would kind of shield and kind of slope to the heightened stoops. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Does the next slide have the conditions from the design review? Or was it, okay, there it is. Okay, it was approved with a consideration of that. Okay. All right, commission members.
I move approval with incorporating the condition.
And I would say to you, to Diana, it's this decision, I think when you could come back to staff, maybe does not need to come back here. So
I would agree. So I move approval with consideration, with asking the developer to consider extending the black hardy material down to the floor of the second floor to align with the other material changes, and that can be reviewed. That final decision can be reviewed by staff.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any other comments before we take the vote?
Madam Chair, I'm
Yes.
Scott, neighborhood planner, and I just want to say that Brenda did send in a revised rendering to show the desire of the committee. So we have that information already.
Okay. Good. Okay, let's call the roll.
Downey?
Yes.
Fluker?
Yes.
Curry?
Yes.
McCray Scott?
Yes.
Slife?
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you very much, Brandon. Next item.
Thank you, everyone.
Madam Chair, I wanted just to note for the record that according to the agenda, there were two agenda items under Euclid Corridor Design Review, 2022-009 and 2022-010-0, which was the Stokes West project. And that has been postponed by the request of the applicant, which is a change to the agenda from yesterday. Thank you.
Thank you. Mandatory referrals. Let's go to these. I think these will be presented by staff. First one is Ordinance 527-2022. This is authorizing the mayor and commissioner of purchases and suppliers to acquire and reconvey properties at 3614 Euclid Holdings LLC, or its designated, located at 3614 Euclid Avenue. And this is for tax increment financing. So who is here to speak to this?
Robin Brown from Economic Development will be sharing on this matter. I did want to note to the commission that this project was granted final approval back in February. It's the Delta Hotel on Euclid Avenue.
Okay. Design approval, you mean?
I'm sorry, yes, final design approval.
Okay. So this is the TIF legislation for the project, Robin?
Yes, good morning, Madam Chair and Commission members. So 3614 Euclid Holdings is proposing to develop the former University Hotel located at 3614 Euclid Avenue. So in order to assist with the project financing, the developer has requested the city impose a 41 30-year non-school TIF, which will support debt service related to the building renovations. The project will create approximately 40 new full-time jobs at approximate payroll of 2.7 million. 3614 Euclid Holdings is a subsidiary of Crimson Rock Capital and CGI Capital, which Crimson Rock Capital was founded in 2004 by Dinas Rodriguez, and CGI Capital was founded in by Ayman Aladina. So the property currently is about 105,000 square feet. It was built in 1964 as a Holiday Inn hotel. It sits on approximately 2 acres. It has about 10 floors. So the post-renovation amenities will include 207 guest rooms, a 3,500 square feet restaurant and bar, 3,000 square feet of meeting space, and approximately 1,000 square feet fitness room. And there will also be other amenities, which will be a grab and grow pantry, a business center, and an outdoor courtyard. And the hotel will be branded the Delta Hotel by Marriott. So via Zoom, we have the development team, which is Dennis Rodriguez, Ayman Aladina, and Sean Byrne with Boyer's Law Firm, if the commission members have any further questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Commission members, we did see this. I now remember the design review case. And I do also remember that we wanted to add signage to the panel, which at the ground floor, which I just saw on the slide. So thank you for doing that on the Euclid Avenue side. I remember that. So thank you for adding that to the ground floor side of the building. Commission members.
I move approval. Downing.
I second McCray Scott.
Motion and a second. Any other comments?
This is Director Huang. I just want to comment that this has the support of Councilwoman House, Chief Epstein, of course, the Department of Economic Development, and from me. Thank you.
Okay. All right, let's call the roll.
Downing,
Yes.
Fluker,
Yes.
Curry,
Yes.
McCray Scott,
Yes.
Slife,
Yes.
Motion carries. It's a great project to get this building back online. So thank you all. Thanks to the development team.
Thanks, everyone.
This is ordinance 547-2022. This is determining the method of making public improvements of construction material capital repairs and capital improvements to First Energy Stadium. Was this one of the mandatory referrals that was heading to administrative approvals?
That's correct. Yesterday I received word from the finance department in the city of Cleveland that this should move to administrative approvals so that it can move on to city council on June 6th. I can summarize the nature of the request, which is fulfilling the contract that we have with the Cleveland Browns dating back to 1996 to do an audit of maintenance and repairs, as well as basically to work with them to do the repair and maintenance.
Okay.
Yep.
Since it's here and not there, if we could just have a motion, we'll just note that it is an administrative approval, even though we're going to do those later. I'd prefer just to do that now. So I'd ask that someone make a motion to note that we're approving this as an administrative referral or approval.
I move approval, noting that this is for administrative approval.
Is there a second?
I second McCray Scott.
A motion and a second. All right, let's call the roll.
Downing,
Yes.
Fluker,
Yes.
Curry,
Yes.
McCray Scott,
Yes.
Slife,
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you. Next item, these special presentations, public art. And I apologize to the twice moving some of these. So I'm really happy that we have time today to give these projects their due to the commission. So first item, if you can go to the next slide, is the front triennial. These are seeking final approval. This is at Wade Oval and North Coast Harbor respectively, so multiple sites. These are temporary sculptures. I'd like to note that I do not believe I need to recuse myself because the Cleveland Foundation does not have funding in these specific sculptures or sites, but we are providing some funding to the front triennial. But I do not believe that I need to recuse myself. I just wanted to disclose that. So with that, I do think I do need to swear in anyone who's speaking to this matter, though. And then I'm going to ask that we take a look at the conditions because I see that there were some on the flats from design review. So anyone who's going to speak to this matter, I'm going to swear you in collectively. Just kind of show yourself. And do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth as you shall answer to the penalty of perjury?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, I saw 2 yeses.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
3 or 4 yeses. So, okay, so we'll turn it over. I don't know, Director Wong, is there any staff comment, or should we just turn it over to the applicants?
Tara Petrus, if you wanted to make a comment before they begin.
Thank you. I am in support of both of these projects as part of Front Triennial. Of course, last year we weren't able to have the triennial due to the pandemic, but we were first introduced to Front in 2021. As the slide notates, it was approved unanimously by Euclid Corridor Design Review yesterday as presented, and it was approved by, and that's for the project at Wade Oval. The project at North Coast Harbor was approved by Downtown Flats yesterday. And I'll let Dro comment on what those conditions were, but I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Front's team to go through the slides.
Thank you all for giving us the time to present these projects. I'm going to just very quickly remind you what Front is and then jump into these 2 projects. Next slide. Just to remind you, Front is a region-wide 3-month-long contemporary art exhibition that was launched in 2018. Its purpose is to generate new economic activity for our region, our city and our region through art tourism, to enhance the brand of Cleveland and Northeast Ohio as a cultural and intellectual hub, and to make our arts institutions and creative professionals even stronger, more vibrant, and sustainable. And that's a particularly critical issue after the past 2 years where this sector has been damaged pretty severely by the pandemic. Next slide. Front is based on a collaboration with our presenting partners, 11 cultural and educational institutions. And that is very much a driver of the success of the project. Next slide. As I said, it's a 3-month-long exhibition of contemporary art from literally around the world. Next slide. In 2018, we had 130 artists, 28 venues, 400 works of art, 3 cities in Northeast Ohio, not just Cleveland, but also Akron and Oberlin. And I can tell you that the Front 22 offering will be of similar size. I think 100 artists and 30 venues. Next slide. We had a strong success in 2018, 250,000 exhibition visits. We counted 90,000 unique visitors. Next slide. and those visitors truly came from all over. Over 30,000 visitors came from across the nation, and we counted more than 25 countries coming to Cleveland. Next slide. And as you remember, not only did we create temporary projects and exhibitions, but we've also invested in engagements that are lasting. And this project we were particularly proud of in 2018, our partnership with Famicos Foundation and the Cleveland Foundation to renovate the Madison as our artist residency hub, and it continues to be a cultural and economic asset on East 105th Street to this day. Next slide. And there is significant economic impact, $31 million as measured by Cleveland State University, and over $38 million in positive public relations value for our city and for our cultural institutions. We hope to exceed that this year. Next slide. So Front International 2022, next slide. It opens July 16. Our theme is "Oh Gods of Dust and Rainbows." Next slide. And that is based on a poem by Langston Hughes, who, as many of you know, spent formative years in Cleveland and continued to visit Cleveland throughout his career. The thematic is really considers the role of art and art making as a form of therapy, healing, a way to work through difficulty and find joy. Let's go to the next slide. The first project I wanted to present is a work by Assad Raza. Next slide. Assad Raza is comes from Pakistani heritage. He grew up in Buffalo, New York. He's a widely praised and exhibited conceptual artist who is very much interested in interventions of place and time. Two pictures here. On the top of an installation he created at the Whitney Museum of Art in New York, where he installed planters with 27 different variety of trees each at different stages of budding and bloom to sort of force the visitor to sort of consider that space as it used to exist as a piece of nature. The second project was an intervention in, at the bottom here, is an intervention in a deconsecrated church in Milan, where he installed a tennis court in the nave and invited people to play tennis as sort of an alternate way to spiritual rejuvenation. So let's go to the next slide. This project is very much, in fact, the second project I'm going to present, very much connected to our location and specifically the Great Lakes. Next slide. This project has three components: an outdoor sculpture, which you'll consider today, but it's also connected to a sailing journey and a song. This sculpture is actually being fabricated in Buffalo, New York, where Assad Raza grew up, and it will be will be installed at the opening of our show. Assad will actually organize a sailing trip from Buffalo to Cleveland that will arrive the day of the opening, and on that sailing trip, his merry crew is going to compose a song which will be performed on his arrival. Next slide. This project is very much engaged with the location, our location at the lake. Assad is having this sculpture fabricated with a special plaster formulated from zebra mussel shells, an invasive species in our lake. And this is really kind of the core of the project. This is about locating people in a place, recognizing that most of us come from some other place and time. So the zebra mussels are very much a immigrant to our lake, and this project draws attention to that tension. Next slide. It will be located on Wade Oval, close to the museum, but Cleveland Museum of Art, which is of course an important venue for our show, but also very close to the Natural History Museum and its observatory. And that's absolutely key to this. Next slide, please. Because this sculpture is a sundial. It's modeled on monumental Indian sundials that were created in the Mughal era. He's shrunk this down to playground size. It's designed to be climbed on, interacted with by families and kids. And as I said, it's coated with a plaster made from zebra mussel shells. Next slide. Here's an example of inspiration of the Astronomical Observatory at Jantar, Manta. Next slide. And like that project, it will be appropriately sighted to match the path of the sun astronomically. Next slide. Here's elevation front and back. Next slide. Here's how it's assembled. Next slide. Drawings. Next slide.
I think that's where it stops.
Yes. I'll point out that this is a temporary sculpture. It's designed to be installed at the opening of our show, and then will be deinstalled shortly after October 2nd. Shall I move on to the next project, or would you like to have discussion on this one, Madam Chair?
Maybe go through them both, and then we will take separate motions, but I think it's okay to go through.
All right. The next project, like Assad Raza's, is engaged with Lake Erie. Cooking Sections is a artistic collective based in UK. And they're sort of well known for their conceptual work that is very engaged with the environment and sustainable food. Next slide. Like Assad Raza, they're considering the lake, but specifically the issue of hypoxia. As we all know, the algae bloom that happens every summer, fed by the runoff from chemical fertilizer from industrial farms. Next slide. Cooking Section proposes installing a series of fountains in the North Coast Harbor. Their purpose for this project, and this is very much in line with their practice, is to celebrate farmers who are using sustainable fertilizer practices which do not contribute to algae blooms. This is key to their practice. As I said, they see this installation as sort of symbolic of the effort to clean up the lake. But really, they're very much concerned with actually creating lasting and measurable change. So this will actually be the first gesture of a 3-month engagement with Spaces Gallery, where they will continue to work with farmers in Northeast Ohio, and will continue to celebrate those farmers that change their practices in ways that improve the lake. So if we go to the next slide, their concept here is to install 5 floating fountains at the North Coast Harbor. Each one would be named after a farm that has embraced sustainable practices. Joe, would you like to sort of talk about the technical side of this?
Yeah, so these fountains will be, like Fred said, they're floating kind of aerator fountains. They'll be anchored to the bottom of the harbor, and then the power cords will run along the bottom and up the Mather, and into the Mather where they'll be connected. So currently we're working with DCA, the Great Lakes Science Center, Lake Erie Electric will be doing the electrical components of this, and then a company called Jones Fish will be doing all the fountain install, and they're a company that works with the metro parks and came kind of highly suggested for us. So so I think that essentially is the setup of the piece. We're working also with the Army Corps of Engineers on permitting. There will be signage and didactics placed along the the walkway here, so folks will understand what the piece is. So, you know, as it was said before, this is a temporary piece. The Science Center was really excited about this. They thought, you know, this could be a piece that also helps manage the debris that collects in this area. So I think there was an interest from other stakeholders in how this piece might function beyond just a symbolic gesture.
And of course, this is these fountains will aerate the lake, so in their small way, they'll improve the water quality right there in the North Coast Harbor.
Could you speak to the conditions here? So what were the conditions or the comments from the design review specifically?
If you can move to the next slide, I believe that next slide has the conditions. Oh, yes, there you go.
Okay, so just, there weren't conditions, it was just to come back with signage, that was it. Okay.
Yeah, that's right. So just for everybody's reference, this is one of about 5 or 6 different projects that are coming through different channels of the city's design review and landmarks. Everything that's a public project will have signage and didactics. Each one of the public sites that we're working on with Front is very different. You know, what works at North Coast Harbor is not going to work at Wade Oval. So there will be site-specific signage that will provide information about the specific project, about Front in general, and then it will tie people back to their website through a QR code or something like that. So the previous review bodies just wanted to make sure that there was information that people could understand what these projects are and that they're a part of something bigger.
Okay, so we're basically, I think, asking the commission to say all signage, didactic signage can come to staff on multiple projects, including this one. Okay.
Exactly. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. So commission members, we need 2 motions, but first questions or comments or about anything that was presented on either of these matters. And I see that Kim Scott has her hand raised, so maybe Kim, you want to go first? Maybe
I'm
not.
sorry. You know what? That was my hand was raised from the last time from the East 90th apartment. Sorry, and I couldn't figure out how to put it down.
Okay, well, good to know. Okay, anybody else, any commission members or motion?
I'll move approval of the first item. I'm excited by the modal sundial.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. We'll call the roll. This is on the project at Wade Oval, the first one.
Downey,
Yes.
Fluker,
Yes.
Curry,
Yes.
McCray Scott,
Yes.
Blythe.
Yes.
Motion carries. Okay, the second item, and I guess their condition on the second item is really for all of front, doesn't need to come back for the signage, but we'll come back to staff.
And Madam Chair, I'll move approval with the condition that they return to staff for signage via administrative review.
I second, McCray Scott.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Let's call the roll.
Downing,
Yes.
Fluker,
Yes.
Curry,
Yes.
McCray Scott,
Yes.
Blythe.
Yes.
Motion carries. So thank you to the team. We're looking forward to all of this coming up. Super exciting. And thank you for all of you, Land Studio Front, all for your leadership. It's really good for the city. I'm excited to partake in all of the projects across the region. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for your
everyone.
consideration.
Thanks.
I'm excited too.
Okay, next item is a special presentation. This is in the Clark Fulton neighborhood. And it looks like there are two items, so a mural and a sculpture. And this is at 2298 and 3275 West 25th Street. And Susie, you and anyone else who's here to speak, I need to swear you in, and Vince. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth as you shall answer to the penalty of perjury?
Yes.
Okay. Sounds like you're the only one here, Susie, so take it away.
I also,
There you go. Okay, two of you, go.
Okay, great. Thanks for having us. This, I think, is our last two from the Clark Fulton Public Art Project. So you've seen some of these. So I'll just run through it. And then if you have any questions, and then Vince, feel free to interrupt me. So if you oh, go ahead.
Wait, can I ask a specific question? Is this one, but I didn't think this was Creative Fusion. So I just want to clarify that.
Oh, no, these,
project
neither
doesn't
of
come
these
from-
are Creative Fusion, so you don't
That's
need
what I
to. Yeah.
Okay.
Good question though. Gets a little confusing. There's a lot of projects. So these projects are co-funded National Endowment for the Arts through Land Studio, and then Metro Health Systems through Metro West Community Development Organization. And these two projects just are do not have any Cleveland Foundation, and they all take place primarily in the Clark Fulton neighborhood along West 25th, Fulton, and some of the areas that cut through the two streets. So you can go ahead. This is kind of just the map of the overall project layout. You can go ahead. And then here is the wall for the Natalie Lanice mural. You may remember we initially had looked to have her mural on Holtkamp, Oregon, but we changed locations. And this is a mural that has they've been asking for a mural for a long time, different stakeholders in this building. So we're excited to be able to give them one that is appropriate for this wall in this building. And so this is on Walton Avenue. You can kind of see, you can see this is facing it. And then if the top left, you're looking at Guanaquitas, the pupusa shop. And then the second top right, you're looking north from the wall on West 25th Street. And then the bottom left, you're looking at the wall, like if you're from on 25th Street looking down Walton, and you can see there's that little plaza next across Walton. And then the bottom right would be if you were standing out front of the pupusa shop looking across the street at the one of the Zubel Books buildings that has some vinyl murals from Julia de Burgos and another mural. So it'll kind of be in this little zone. There will be lots of art in this zone, which is exciting. And then the wall, it houses a record shop, a little church, and then on the front, you've got the pupusa shop. So some small businesses that will be highlighted by this new project. So you can go ahead. This is some of Natalie's past work. So she has sort of a signature abstract style, but this project's kind of a new style she's delving into. but not totally different than her, historical style. She's just evolving. So you can go ahead. So this is the selected favorite color palette and design. She tried to take into account the windows. The building owner has replaced some of the windows now. So originally they were boarded up, but they now have windows. So she will be just going around those new windows and rather than having to paint over them, which I'm happy about. But they'll still fit right in with that kind of delineation she's got going on. And then in the process, we're also taking a lot of wires and old signage and kind of junk off the wall. So this has been a good opportunity to work with the building owner to clean up the wall that was very busy and kind of had a lot of historical remnants stuck to it. So this is I feel like it's kind of a mountain range shot, and then it design, and it really kind of covers the whole wall. We're getting it professionally primed by Garbo Third Company, and getting some of the electrical stuff covered and, cleaned up for this as well in preparation for the project. So you can go ahead. And these were the other color concepts that were kind of the second choice if anybody wants to weigh in on them. But I think everybody kind of agreed that that first one is the preferred, and that was her original design concept. So you can go ahead to the next slide, and I'll go ahead. Let me just run through this one before we have any questions.
Yep, go ahead.
Okay, so Dickey Lanes, it's a small bowling alley on West 25th Street, so just a little bit south of where the other wall was. Facing, this is on the east side of 25th Street, and it faces a parking lot that is owned by Dickey, the Dickey family across the street. The artist selected for this project is Ryan Janke. He did, with an art collective years ago, he did a little documentary about Dickey, the family and the place. And so he has a good relationship with them, and his style really kind of fits that cool retro feel of the organization. So you can go ahead. There's some context shots. So on the top left, you're kind of looking at it from the south across the street. There's an old building that had a fire that, so that's kind of an eyesore that was approved for demolition. And then on the top right, that's looking across at their parking lot. And then on the bottom, you're just looking south on 25th Street. So you can see it's by that Sweets distribution. So because okay, and then here's some of Ryan's past work that you can see his style. He's generally a two-dimensional mural artist and painter, but for this one, we're branching out a little bit into something more three-dimensional and sculptural, but it still very much reflects his style. So you can move ahead. And here is the design. It looks like it's a little stretched out on there, but so there will be 3 separate little signs installed by Signature Signs. They work with an engineer and, building codes and all that, and they will acquire the appropriate permits, and we'll be using a combination of aluminum, epoxy, resin paints, and neon lights. I thought I had put more details about the materials on here. I think I had, but I have more details about the materials if you need them. And actually this picture, he had placed it just for, consideration on the south side of the building. But I think the agreement from design review, and I agree with this, is that it would be best fit just on the other side, on the north side of the building, just because, it sits up against that other building on the south, and it's just kind of balances out nicer on that side. But if you have any thoughts on that positioning, you could let us know too. Another concern from design review was just the positioning of the designs. Some people thought maybe the outer sculptures could be curved inward or outward. I personally don't think that is necessary. I like them all straightforward. I don't really want it to mess with the visuals too much by turning them in different directions. But that was just a concern, for cars coming north or south along West 25th Street, if they were pointed if they were slightly angled in or slightly angled out, maybe it would be more visible to someone driving by. You can go ahead. I think that's it. All right. And I don't know, Vince, if you have anything to add that I forgot.
Yeah, no, it's very, very thorough, Susie, but I do just want to add that I think it's great to, invest public art in these two buildings. They're a kind of building that Cleveland really still has an abundance, which are very important types of buildings that house, very viable businesses that probably could not afford to be in, like, in any of the newer developments that, I'm of course happy to see in the city. So these are, Natalie's artwork was originally going to be on a different building in the district, but I like it being on the, well, I call it the Guanaquitas building. I don't know what it's really called.
It doesn't really have a name. Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, because it's a beautiful, neighborhood brightening artwork, but it also calls attention to a building that, it's not being, undergoing massive investment, but it is being taken care of, and it's an important type of building.
Okay. Thank you. Question. So for the first mural, you're asking us to approve the color selection as presented. With the second one, you're saying that you disagree with design review and you would like to keep it all flat, if you will. Is that correct?
Yes, that would be my personal preference, but yeah, I'd like to hear what you have to say about that recommendation. But they approved with, that wasn't, a requirement, that was just a recommendation from design review.
Okay, so these are recommendations. Okay, thank you. Commission members?
I move approval.
Okay.
Downing.
A second.
Oh, we have a motion. And a second. I have to be honest, I actually agree with you, Susie. I don't think they should be twisted or oriented. I think my opinion, but so I know this is a recommendation, so do what you see fit, but my sense is I prefer it as presented.
And that, Madam Chair, that's why I didn't add them to my motion, because I agree with you.
Okay, good. So a motion a second. Any other comments before we call the roll? Okay.
Yes, Downey,
Yes.
Fluker,
Yes.
Curry,
Yes.
McCray Scott,
Yes.
Blythe,
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you, Marka. And I think last we have the end of, thank you. The end of year report. So this is for information purposes only. And Tara and Vince are going to present this. And this is, I believe this is a requirement of the, I think the program, the public art program, as well as I think the relationship and the work that Land Studio does for the city on a citywide basis. So with that, we'll turn it over to you, Tara, to kick it
Madam
off.
Chair,
Mm-hmm.
I think we have administrative approvals that require a vote.
We do, actually.
I just wanted to point that out. Thank you.
Okay. I think you guys get through this in about 10 minutes.
Oh, it'll be less than that.
Yes, easily.
Okay, let's go ahead then.
Thank you. This is basically a summary of activities with the public art program, as you know, which is Chapter 186, where we dedicate 1.5% of certain capital projects towards a public art component. Next slide, please. So there are currently 16 projects in various stages, from design to RFQ to middle of fabrication. There is approximately about $2 million in funding for those 16 projects, with budgets ranging from $11,000 to $1.1 million, and also $77,000 in other city sources. So some of the things that happened in 2021 was we are in the process of developing a process to implement funding to pay artists for proposals, as well as maintain and conserve the city's collection of public artwork specifically for this program. And Land Studio did an assessment of maintenance and repair needs. Next slide, please. So this is just a list of all the early stage projects, the Mounted Police Unit, Woodland Rec Center, Lake Avenue Bridge, Fire Station 26, Clark Recreation, and Orr Park. We are in the process of drafting 3 different RFQs for the Buckeye Streetscape, East 140th Streetscape, and the police headquarters, which actually has the bulk of that public art funds. And then we recently selected an artists collective for the East 185th Streetscape, and there are several in design development. There's an artist that is in the process of creating the artwork for the Kavasik Rec Center. They're actually in the fabrication stage. The kennel, the artist, has also come up with final designs, so that can go through for approval. We've also selected 3 artists for multiple artworks at the Frederick Douglass Recreation Center. And then there's another artist fabricating for the East 105th and Ashbury Plaza. And we are almost at completion with Walter Burke's Playground, which has a basketball court mural. Next slide, please. This is just a map of the various locations for public art program projects. The yellow ones are the ones that are at various stages, and the blue are the ones that have been completed already. Next slide, please. One of the things that was completed last year were 7 utility boxes that came out of the Clark Avenue Streetscape. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. These are just some of the artists' installed works. Next slide, please. 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 Okay, for this portion, as far as the draft maintenance and conservation record, I'm going to turn that over to Vince Reddy to go through that portion of this presentation.
Thanks, Tara. Yes, everyone. This is Vince with Land Studio, and we started working last year with it was Clay Harris and Tara and I on a just a maintenance project for the artworks that have been produced through the public art program. And we, the software we're using is very simple. It's a flat Excel file, sortable though, and maybe I think this, the maintenance of the public art collection has to be worked out some way. And I think this is a way to start it. We're treating each like individual element as a separate artwork so that it can be rated and, and we can sort these by how desperate the need is for maintenance of a various artwork. Next slide, please. And so we have a photo record that's part of the file. And this is Angelica Pozzo's Tuffet Triangle at Collinwood Rec Center, which is needs some minor maintenance. There's some missing tiles and stuff, but for an artwork that was installed in 2010, it's holding up very well. The next slide, please. This is Melissa Daubert's Old Brooklyn Route Riders, which has been in place for like 5 years now, and made out of materials that look like they couldn't possibly weather a single winter in Cleveland. But Melissa is a local artist who's expert with working with these unusual and durable materials. Next slide. I think that's about it. Oh, and this is also came out of the public art program. This is the pavilion at Crooked River State Park, and I'd say the condition of this artwork is debatable depending on your perspective, but it's structurally it's in good shape. It's just been it's been decorated as you might expect it to be. We also have maps within the maintenance plan showing you the location of every individual artwork. The next slide. Then the location of individual artworks within a project. This is the location of Angelica Pozzo's individual benches and tables at Collinwood Rec Center. And that's it.
Any questions?
So this is, any questions or comments? I know that you don't need to actually approve this or anything.
So, Madam Chair, I just have a question. So just taking the case of the missing tiles, which not extensive, but how does that get repaired, or what is the process?
We're in the development of the process because funds have been identified. So city planning will work with our finance and purchasing groups as well as Mayor's Office of Capital Projects to establish the process for getting those repaired. They probably would be worse first situations until we are out of funds, and then we would apply new funds for 2023.
Yeah, just traditionally, the ordinance that sets up the public art program requires whatever city agency that has jurisdiction over that particular location is responsible for maintaining the artwork, which really hasn't worked that well. You know, with some agencies like Cleveland Water has been like a phenomenal partner with the program. But you know, most city agencies are just not set up to maintain artwork. So this new direction that Tara is leading us in, I think will be very helpful in terms of conserving the artworks that are generated through the public art program.
I have one idea to that point, which is that in the ordinance, like if there's a capital project that will not be seen by the public, then the dollars can be used at additional sites or in other ways, right? So the ordinance had that provision so that we weren't putting public art in places where no one would access it. So I wonder if you ought to consider working with the administration to see it's possible for just the next few public art projects that are on capital projects that are not accessible to the public, that instead of applying them somewhere else, the funds, is that those dollars go into a repair fund to build up a little bit of you know, some dollars for maintenance as a strategy, as opposed to going ahead and building a few more new things. Now, I think we should definitely use the public art ordinance if it's a project that is a public project. So I'm not talking about rerouting those. But if it is a capital improvement to a garage or something else, why don't we, for the next couple of years, take those dollars and build this maintenance fund or some additional funds to repair? So it's just an idea that you may want to explore. And if it requires an amendment to the ordinance to just add that provision to the kind of non-accessible civic projects, I think we ought to think about amending the ordinance to create a pipeline of funds.
Thanks, Lillian. We are actually working on some amendments to the ordinance to make it work a little better. That's something that we could also explore in addition to the fact that the way the ordinance is set up now, you can combine dollars. We have actually an example of Kerry Kane Park and Orr Park. The one part, Kerry Kane, isn't in a very visible area. So we are in the process of combining those two funds to put something just in Orr Park. So it doesn't have to necessarily be on site. It can be somewhere nearby, but I do like the idea you presented. And I think it's something we should explore to add additional funding dollars for repair and maintenance.
Yeah.
I could add one thing to that. An example of that we already have is the pavilion at the skate park, which was funded by public art dollars that were generated by the skate park, but also by a garage in Mamie Mitchell's ward. I think that was Ward 6 at the time. And money from that project, which would have been inaccessible, was combined for the artwork at the skate park.
Okay.
So,
yeah, I knew that was going on. I'm just suggesting that you also have the flexibility to use those non-accessible dollars for a maintenance fund. Because I don't believe we should build a whole lot more new public art till we figure out how to maintain the ones that we do have.
Yeah.
So I'm suggesting for the next few years, or as many projects that are inaccessible, that those dollars get parked somewhere for maintenance.
Yeah,
and
I think we've had to, you know, again, under Tara's leadership, found other funding that can cover the cost of maintenance and repair, because, you know, we've tried many times with the help of many city staff over the years to figure out a way how the money from the public art program, which is generally bond funding, could be used to cover maintenance, but you know, it just never has worked. And we've found similar situations with other cities where bond funding cannot be used, you know, to be put into a fund that might pay for repairs for a project that the bond funding was not used for. So, you know, I think eventually we've given up on that. I think we can honestly say, and are working with other funding sources that the city can provide to, which I think is part of the maturing of the process. So I'm not disagreeing with you at all, because that's really what we've been working on for years, and I think we are close to having a solution now.
Okay.
I agree with you, Lillian. We should be taking care of the existing public art as we
Oh, yeah,
continue to do
definitely.
new projects, which is why we push really, really hard with our finance group to establish this fund for maintenance and repair.
Okay. Well, thank you for your leadership, and appreciate it. And thank you for the update.
Thank you.
I think,
Madam Chair, I just wanted to add a special note of thanks to Tara, who of course is our lone public art coordinator, who not only has to coordinate these fairly complex public art contracts and bring them through design, work with artists, but also across the city, just coordinating every art project really by location. So I just want to commend Tara for her work.
Thank
you,
Director.
We are lucky to have you, so we know that. So thank you. All right, I think we have administrative matters. Is that correct? Left. And I think we're going to go through them one by one and just take a look at them, and then do one vote at the end. I might just kind of read the headline. This is 532-2022, determining the method of making public improvements. And this is for a city-owned, city-leased park. I think this is not a specific site. This is to be able to apply and accept grants and capital for these capital projects. Next one. I look at this. In addition, this is to be able to apply and accept grants for public works projects as well, public facilities. Next slide.
These are the numbered rezonings that are coming back for administrative approval.
Yep. Okay, next one. There, we saw that, and that's it. Okay. So can I have a motion for administrative approvals?
I move approval. Downing.
I second McCray Scott.
Motion and a second. Can I call the roll?
Yes, Downing,
Yes.
Fluker,
Yes.
Curry,
Yes.
McCray Scott,
Yes.
Slife.
Yes.
Motion carries. All right, we have a director's report. And so.
Right, I'll keep it brief. So really quick on a staffing update, we're really happy to welcome Shannon Leonard back as Chief City Planner. So I know she's on the line. Shannon, if you wanted to briefly say anything on your return. She started again this Tuesday.
Good morning, or good morning. I'm back. My family decided not to move to North Carolina. I really, really missed the work that I was doing here at the city of Cleveland. It was a big change, and I just kept going back and forth, and ultimately coupled that with the housing market and the economy. And my husband and I decided with my family that right now we would like to stay in the city of Cleveland. And I had the opportunity to come back and work for the city of Cleveland. And I just feel really blessed, and I'm really excited to be back. The work that I was doing here was really important to me. And ultimately, sometimes you figure out that you're not walking in your purpose. And that's something that I was luckily able to figure out with a lot of prayer and a lot of discussions with my family. And so I'm happy to be back, and I'm excited to be working with all of you guys. So thank you.
We are very excited Shannon is back. She is deputized to work on our form-based code work, as well as other innovative zoning projects that has been in the pipeline. And now that Shannon has returned, we're going to refocus her role, as well as hire an entry-level zoning person to assist her and Maurice with some of the routine regulatory tasks. So thanks, Shannon. I also want to mention that earlier this week in the news, you may have seen that Callie Mersman has been promoted to advise Mayor Bibb as the senior strategist for transit and mobility. So we're really excited for her. Not only will she be advising on higher level policy regarding transportation initiatives, but she'll be operationalizing Vision Zero, which is to reduce all traffic related crashes and deaths, both property and people, and damage. And then also operationalizing complete and green streets to really create a network of multimodal work. So, that is among many other initiatives and policies. And so we will continue to host her in the planning department, but she'll be mobilized to work throughout City Hall on this type of strategy. And this is the first ever type of role in the administration. So we're really, really excited about that.
Great.
I wanted to share a new board member appointment, which is filling the 5th and final seat of the Board of Zoning Appeals. Nina Holzer will be joining the board this Monday, June 6th. We're really excited about this as well. Nina is a resident in the Clifton Baltic neighborhood in Edgewater. She works for CHN Housing. She's worked for Cleveland Neighborhood Progress, and she actually used to work in the Department of Community Development. And we feel that she'll add quite a bit of knowledge and insight into the neighborhoods since she's worked across them. She's also worked specifically on some of the lead housing issues under Lead Safe in the Department of Community Development, Healthy Homes Initiative. And then also just her love for cities and urban areas. I think she'll be able to really, make decisions based on what's best for our city. So Mayor Bibb appointed her, and we're really excited about this.
Do you have any timeline idea of like what the timeline might be to fill the last seat on planning and or the alternates? Is there a sense of like over the next few months?
Yeah, thank you, Chair Curry. So we have been actively pursuing interviews. This is Chief Puente and I for the remaining seats on the Planning Commission. And we actually will be sending a letter out soon to see if there is a candidate who will accept. And I'm also in the process of trying to schedule an interview with someone else for the final seat. We will be moving Stami Paul into the alternate seat once we're able to get this letter established for a new member.
Okay.
So it will require council to approve. Planning Commission is the only commission that requires council approval. And so that will need to go through council committee as well as be heard on Monday nights. So it'll be a few months.
So then there'll be one more seat. So then there'll be another process for the 7th seat.
I'm working on it now. I'm interviewing someone else. Yep.
Okay. Thank you very much.
And then just in terms of upcoming job postings, there is a senior assistant city planner in the zoning section. So if you want to work with Shannon, it's posted online at governmentjobs.com. You will also see these upcoming job postings for project coordinator, urban design and architecture. This is to replace our architect position and kind of broaden the scope of their work to include more, broader design, coordination of downtown flats, as well as provide more guidelines for design review and streetscape. I'm hoping for major projects we'll be able to develop streetscape guidelines and requirements as well. We're also going to hire a strategic planning initiatives project coordinator, and this person will be deputized to work on key strategic initiatives. The Vision for the Valley Publicly Accessible Boardwalk to be one, whether it's transit-oriented development and policies around that, multimodal work, and other policies related to zoning, addressing climate change, etc. This person will be supervising a policy analyst, data analyst, as well as the new Cleveland Foundation fellow that we'll be hosting and planning coming in July. And then there will be a city planner role posted. This is the posting for Sharonda Watley's former position. So I think there is one more slide. This is just a brief note that we are supporting the City of Shaker Heights Lee Road Action Plan. They're entering phase 2 of their planning process. And as many of you know, Lee Road in Shaker Heights is directly adjacent to Ward 1 in the Lee Harvard neighborhood. And so it's really critical that we're working together to make sure that Lee Road is one consistent corridor. So we are asking for folks' input. There are two options, in person and virtual. In person on June 15th at the dealership on Lee Road. And then also there's a virtual Zoom meeting on June 22nd. I don't think you can click the Zoom meeting link, but it should be on their website in Shaker Heights. And that's all from me. So
thank you. Commission members, any questions for the director or thoughts before we adjourn? I just want to close with a thank you to you, Director Wong, and the staff. I think a lot of the, you've made a lot of really good improvements to the agenda, how the meetings are run, the kind of sort of way that you're helping us manage the time in advance. And also, I think especially making sure for the public that they can see what the actions are by the Design Review Commission. I just think it's much more transparent and kind of user-friendly and easier for us to understand both the public's comment as well as the design review. So just want to thank you for that and feel like we're starting to catch our stride now.
Thank you, Chair Curry. It means a lot to me, and I'm glad that my goals have been reflected in these meetings, really around transparency, public access, and really procedural cleanup, and just making things smoother and more efficient. So I'm glad to hear that. Thanks.
I think our next big thing to tackle is how to get back in person, but not lose the public accessibility that having these streamlined I think has been a great benefit to have them on YouTube. So I know it might take a while to have the right technology, but eventually it would be nice to also for us to have more conversations. So to be continued, but I know we'll figure it out. All right, thank you all. Meeting is adjourned and we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Thank you.